This happened last fall, when a friend and I booked a weekend away from the city. We both needed a break, somewhere quiet, off-grid, no notifications or traffic. Just trees, air, and silence. We found a cabin listed on Airbnb about 2 hours outside town. The photos looked perfect. Small, clean, tucked deep into the woods with a wood stove and a fire pit out back. The reviews were all 5 stars. Nothing but praise for the host, a guy named Carl. Said he was hands-off, respectful, kept the place spotless. We arrived just before dusk. The road leading in was barely more than a dirt path, overgrown on both sides, our tires bumping over rocks and fallen branches. The forest was dense and dark, even during daylight. By the time we reached the cabin, the sun was already sinking behind the trees. The place was nice. Minimal, old furniture, creaky floors, the smell of cedar. It looked exactly like the photos. We brought groceries, lit a fire, and cracked open some beers. There was no Wi-Fi, which we expected, but both of our phones still had signal. Barely 1 bar, but enough to send texts and load the map. That first night was peaceful. We talked, cooked, and played cards by lantern light. The woods outside were completely silent, the kind of silence that only exists miles away from everything. It was calming at first. The second day we went for a hike and came back in the late afternoon. Our phones were dead. Not drained, dead. No signal, no loading screen, not even the emergency call option. We tried restarting, moving around, and standing on chairs near the windows. Nothing. That's when we noticed the lock on the door. It was heavy, an old brass mechanism that looked like it had been added after the cabin was built. On the inside, there was a simple deadbolt, but outside, there was a sliding latch, thick, rusted, and clearly meant to be secured from outside. Neither of us had noticed it the first night. We checked the windows, nailed shut. No back door, just the front and the surrounding trees. That evening, the atmosphere changed. The silence stopped feeling peaceful. It felt loaded, heavy, like the woods were holding their breath. It started around 10 p.m., the sound of boots crunching leaves just outside the cabin. Slow, deliberate footsteps. Then a beam of light scanned across the front window, just for a second, and disappeared. We froze, sat in the dark, not even breathing. Another pass. A flashlight, clearly, sweeping along the porch. No knocking, no sound but the occasional step and the beam sliding over the cabin. It circled the building twice, then nothing. We didn't sleep that night. The next morning, we tried to drive out. Packed everything in under 5 minutes, but the dirt path we came in on had been blocked. 3 fallen trees, freshly cut. Clean cuts. No storm, no wind, just placed there. We walked. For hours. No reception. Every direction looked the same. We made it halfway back toward what we thought was the main road before we realized we were going in circles. That night, it happened again. The flashlight. The footsteps. But this time, whoever it was got closer. We heard someone testing the door, trying the handle. It rattled once, then twice. Still no voice, still no knock. Just the sound of someone checking if they could get in. We pushed the couch in front of the door, moved the kitchen table, armed ourselves with kitchen knives, sat on the floor, backs to the wall, and waited. Neither of us said a word. By morning, we were unraveling. My friend checked the Airbnb app, trying to pull up the host's profile. Nothing. Gone. As if it had never existed. The booking still showed in her history, but the listing was gone too. On the third night, we didn't turn on any lights. We listened, waited. When the light came, it didn't circle. It stopped in front of the cabin and stayed there. One long, steady beam shining into the center of the window. Then it flicked off, and the footsteps began again. This time, they didn't leave. We sat there, too scared to move, as someone walked slowly around the cabin for hours. No attempts to break in. No voice. Just the sound of boots and breath and something scraping along the wood siding. At sunrise, we left everything behind and ran. Just ran. Through the woods. No trail. No direction. We stumbled through brush, tripped over roots, screamed at the trees. After what felt like hours, we finally hit a road and flagged down a car. They took us to a nearby gas station. We used their landline to call the police. By the time they reached the cabin, it was empty. The trees blocking the road were gone. No footprints, no flashlight, and no record of anyone named Carl owning property in that area. We don't know who was watching us, or why. But I haven't booked a cabin off the grid since, because it was supposed to be a peaceful weekend away, and it turned into something I still haven't fully escaped. This happened late last year, and it still feels like my brain hasn't caught up with how real it was. I'd been using dating apps on and off. Nothing serious, just chatting, grabbing drinks, figuring people out. That's how I met him. His name was Matt. Profile said he worked in carpentry, liked dogs, hiking, and 70s horror movies. He was smart, charming in a quiet way. Not too pushy, not too smooth. Our conversations felt easy, real. He asked thoughtful questions, called when he said he would, picked nice spots to meet. We had 3 dates in total, all normal, public, daylight. We grabbed coffee, went to a flea market, had dinner at a little Italian place. He was respectful, polite, never once made me feel off. That's probably what got me to say yes when he invited me to his place. He said he lived a little outside the city, in a farmhouse he'd been renovating. Send pictures. Said it would be quiet, a nice change from the chaos of downtown. I didn't think twice. The drive took longer than expected. The GPS cut out about 10 minutes before I arrived, and the last stretch was all dirt roads and thick trees. I pulled up to the house around 6 p.m., just as the sky was turning pale gray. It looked just like the photos, old, beautiful in a rustic way. Wide porch, weathered wood, big yard surrounded by forest. He came out to meet me, smiling like always, wearing a faded flannel and dusty boots. We went inside. He showed me the kitchen, the living room, and pointed out a few things he was working on. New floors, cabinets, bathroom tile. I remember thinking it smelled like old books and fresh sawdust. It felt lived in, but not in a messy way. Just quiet. Then he asked if I wanted to see the upstairs. I followed him up a narrow staircase, the kind that creaks with every step. The hallway was dim, long, lined with closed doors. He led me to a room at the far end. That's when I heard the lock click. I turned, and the door behind us was shut. There was no expression on his face anymore. Just blank. He didn't say anything, just stepped back and watched me. I reached for the knob. It wouldn't budge. My heartbeat was instant, hard, loud in my throat. I asked what was going on. Still nothing. He just stood there. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out something I couldn't see clearly. I didn't wait. I shoved past him, down the hall, trying every door. All locked. I ran downstairs. The front door had a bolt across it I hadn't seen before, padlocked from the inside. The windows didn't open. I checked. Every single one. I started calling out, yelling, anything, but it was like screaming into a vacuum. No neighbors, no traffic, no one around for miles. Then I heard it. A thud from upstairs. Then footsteps. But it wasn't just him. Multiple footsteps. I backed into the kitchen, grabbing the biggest knife I could find. My breathing was erratic, shallow. Every corner of the house felt too small, like the walls were inching in. I heard them coming down the stairs, slow, uneven. It wasn't until I saw them that I realized what I'd walked into. 2 other people, one older, one younger. both expressionless, both barefoot, dressed in pale clothes. They didn't say a word, just stood there at the bottom of the stairs, watching me like I was an animal that wandered into the wrong cage. He joined them a moment later, still silent, still calm. They didn't move, just stared. I don't know how long I stood there with the knife. My hand was shaking so badly I don't know if I could have used it. Then something changed. A knock. At the front door. Everyone froze. A delivery driver. Wrong house, wrong turn. No idea he was saving my life. While they hesitated, I ran. I don't even remember unlocking the door. I just remember the cold air, the dirt under my shoes, and the scream that finally left my throat. The driver didn't ask questions. He drove. Fast. Took me straight to the nearest police station. When they went back to the farmhouse, it was empty. No trace of him. No trace of the others. No names, no records, no ownership tied to the property. Just a place with a long, quiet history of missing women. Every few years, just far enough apart to avoid patterns. They called it a fluke. Said I was lucky. But I don't think it was luck. I think it was timing. One wrong minute later, and I would have been just another story buried in the woods. This happened last year, and I still think about it more than I should. It was a Saturday night. Cold, damp, early spring. I'd gone to a friend's birthday party a few neighborhoods over. Nothing crazy, just drinks, music. Too many people crammed into a too small apartment. By the time I left, it was past 1 a.m. I didn't feel like waiting on the sidewalk alone, so I ordered a ride from inside the building. I checked the app twice. Black Honda Civic, plates matched, driver named Chris. The photo showed a clean-cut guy, short beard, baseball cap. A minute later, the car pulled up right outside. Same make, same plates, same photo. I got in without thinking. The guy said nothing when I opened the door. He just gave me a quick nod and started driving. At first, nothing seemed off. The car was clean, music low, not a word spoken. I was tired, a little buzzed, so I leaned back and tried to relax. But after a few minutes, I noticed we weren't taking the route the GPS usually recommends. I leaned forward, casually, like I was just checking something on my phone. The app wasn't tracking the ride anymore. The little car icon had frozen, and then the whole thing shut down. I stared at the screen. Battery full. No warning signs. No glitch. It just died. I tried to reopen it. Nothing. I couldn't even get a signal. I looked up at the driver. "Hey, are we still going the right way?" I asked, trying to sound normal. He didn't answer. He didn't even flinch. My stomach sank. I looked outside. We were on a 2-lane road now, trees on either side, no streetlights, no buildings, just dark. Too dark. I knew this area. We weren't supposed to be anywhere near here. I reached for the door handle slowly, trying not to make it obvious. It was locked. That's when I noticed the smell. Something sharp, like cheap industrial cleaner mixed with old sweat. The kind of smell that clings to your clothes. My heart was pounding. I said his name. "Chris?" And he looked at me through the rearview mirror. And it wasn't him. It wasn't the man in the photo. Not even close. His face was wrong. Same cap, but no beard. His jaw was wider, nose crooked like it had been broken at some point. And his eyes didn't look like someone giving a ride home. They looked like someone deciding what to do next. I remember thinking, this is it. This is how those stories start. The ones you read online and think, God, how does someone end up in that situation? I don't know what made me move, but I did. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small pepper spray canister I kept on my keychain. I'd had it for years and never used it. Not once. I told myself, I'd just hold it. But my hands were shaking. I don't even remember unclipping the safety. He noticed. He swerved the car hard to the right, into a gravel pull-off that dropped into a small clearing. I slammed against the door, my seatbelt cutting into my collarbone. Before the car even stopped moving, he twisted in his seat like he was going to grab me. That's when I sprayed. Full blast. Straight into his eyes. He screamed. I mean, screamed. I unlocked the door and threw myself out. Didn't even close it behind me. I ran into the trees, branches ripping at my clothes, my boots slipping in the mud. I didn't stop until I couldn't hear him anymore. Just the sound of my own breathing, ragged and fast, and the wind moving through the trees. I hid behind a fallen log and tried to make my phone work. It wouldn't. I just sat there, shaking, curled in on myself, listening for footsteps. I don't know how long I waited. An hour? Maybe more. Eventually, I saw headlights in the distance. I stayed hidden until the car passed. Then I moved. I found a road, flagged down a passing truck. The guy didn't ask questions, just let me in and called the cops for me. The weirdest part? When the police went back, the car was gone. No trace, no tire marks, no ID on the driver. The license plate was fake. The photo on the app had been stolen. Some random guy's Facebook profile. They never found him. And I never take rideshares at night anymore. Not alone. Not ever again. Because I got in a car that matched the app perfectly, and it nearly cost me my life. This happened during my second year of college. I was taking evening shifts at a small coffee shop just off campus. Nothing fancy, just part-time work to cover rent and textbooks. The hours were long, and most nights I didn't clock out until after 11. The campus shuttle stopped running at 10:30, so unless I begged someone for a ride, I had to walk home. It wasn't a long walk, maybe 15 minutes, through one of those quiet residential neighborhoods full of old houses and dim porch lights. Nothing had ever happened before. I didn't even think twice about it. That night was colder than usual. Mid-March. The sidewalks were slick with leftover rain, and my breath came out in little bursts of fog. I had my hood up, earbuds in, music playing low, just enough to keep me company. Halfway down the block, I saw movement up ahead. A car parked at the curb, engine still running, its headlights off. I slowed down a little, something in me registering that it didn't look right. I paused my music and pulled out one earbud. That's when I heard it. Not yelling, not even arguing. Just a scuffle, quick, quiet, like someone trying not to be heard. And then something that sounded like a thud. Not loud, just final. I stopped walking. There was a man in the driveway of a house 2 doors ahead. He was kneeling next to something, or someone, on the ground. For a second, I thought maybe someone had fallen, maybe he was helping. But then, he stood up. He was holding something long and heavy in his hand. A tire iron or a crowbar. That's when I saw the body. It was a man, face down, unmoving. The killer stepped back and wiped his hand on his jacket. Then he turned and looked straight at me. Not a glance, not a passing look. His eyes locked on mine like he'd been waiting for me. I don't remember breathing. My feet started moving before I could think. I turned and ran, full sprint, heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I cut through a side yard, vaulted a low fence, and ducked between 2 parked cars. I could hear footsteps behind me, fast, steady, and too close. I crawled under the back porch of a house I'd never been to before, my knees scraping against cold cement, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. I tried calling 911. Nothing. No bars. The neighborhood had always had spotty reception, and I was in a dead zone. I stayed silent, curled up against the foundation, heart threatening to burst out of my chest. I could hear him, his boots scraping against the sidewalk, his breath in the cold air, slow and controlled. He didn't yell, he didn't panic. He just searched, patient, like he had all night. At one point, he stood just a few feet away from where I was hiding. I could see the hem of his coat, the weapon still in his hand. He stood there for what felt like forever, listening, and then he moved on. I waited another 10 minutes before I crawled out and bolted. I ran until I reached a well-lit gas station on the main road. My phone finally lit up with signal. I called the police. They found the body, middle-aged man, local, no criminal record, nothing that stood out. The killer was never identified. No plates on the car, no cameras on that street, no usable description except mine. And even that was shaky. I moved a month later, changed my shifts, changed my number, started carrying pepper spray, then later a small tactical flashlight with a strobe. I don't walk alone anymore, not even a few blocks, because I didn't do anything wrong. I wasn't involved. I was just walking home. Wrong place, wrong time. And I know he saw me. I still don't know why he didn't come back for me, but I live like he might. This happened about a year ago when I moved to a new city for work. I didn't have a big budget, didn't know anyone, and just needed a place to land while I figured things out. I found a listing online for a cheap one-bedroom unit, tucked behind a bigger house in an older neighborhood. The rent was suspiciously low, but the place looked clean in the photos and was fully furnished, utilities included. I convinced myself I'd just gotten lucky. The landlord was an older guy named Ron. He seemed harmless, friendly in that overly familiar way, a little too eager to help. The kind of man who talked too much and smiled too long. He gave me a quick tour, handed me the keys, and I moved in by the end of the week. At first, everything seemed fine. The apartment was small but cozy, nothing fancy, but it worked. The walls were thin, and the floors creaked in a way that made the place feel like it was constantly exhaling. Still, I liked the quiet. But then he started showing up, not just for repairs or maintenance, unannounced. Sometimes early in the morning, sometimes late in the evening. He'd use his key and just walk in. No knock, no warning. He always had an excuse. Light bulbs, the water heater, mail that had accidentally been delivered to the main house. It never felt right, but I told myself he was just being helpful. I didn't want to overreact. I didn't want to be dramatic. But the unease built quickly. I started noticing subtle shifts around the apartment. Items in the kitchen not where I left them. My towel is always slightly damp, even when I haven't used it. The bathroom mirror had a fresh fingerprint on it one morning when I knew for a fact I hadn't touched it. I stopped feeling safe. I started locking the bedroom door at night, even though I knew he had a key to the front. Then one night, after brushing my teeth, I looked up at the smoke detector in the corner of my bedroom. I'd seen it every day, but that night it felt off. It was angled down, not out, just enough to make me notice. I got a chair and took it down. Inside was a small wired camera. That moment didn't feel real at first. My brain couldn't process what I was holding. I checked the bathroom next. Another camera hidden behind the vent. Then the living room, inside the back panel of the TV. My entire body went cold. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the middle of the apartment with the lights on and every window locked. The cameras sat on the kitchen counter like they were still watching me. The next morning, I left, early. But I didn't go far. I waited just around the corner. I wanted to know if I was imagining things. I wasn't. He came in not long after I left, walked straight into the apartment, looked around, and stayed inside for over half an hour. I filmed it. That was the last time I stepped foot inside that building. I sent everything, photos of the cameras, the footage of him entering without permission, to the police. They opened an investigation, and it didn't take long to uncover what he'd been doing. He had hard drives in his house, dozens of them. Footage going back years. Showers, bedrooms, people just living their lives with no idea they were being watched. I wasn't his first tenant. I probably wouldn't have been the last. He was arrested, and I followed the case from a distance. But I never went back to get my things. I didn't want any part of that place touching my life again. I live somewhere else now. A high-rise, secure building, front desk, cameras I can see. But I still check every smoke detector, every vent, every mirror, because I know now that feeling I had, that subtle, nagging discomfort. It wasn't paranoia. It was instinct, and I ignored it. This happened a little over a year ago when I was broke, between jobs, and desperate for a place to live. I'd just left a rough relationship and couldn't afford my own apartment, so I turned to a Facebook housing group. That's where I found the ad. The post was short. Someone looking for a roommate to share a 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet part of town. Rent was cheap, the pictures looked fine, and it was available immediately. I messaged the poster, a woman named Jenna. She replied within minutes. We met the next day. She seemed normal enough. Quiet, a little awkward maybe, but polite. The apartment was old but clean, dim lighting, weird layout, but nothing I hadn't lived with before. I was too tired to be picky. I moved in the same weekend. For the first few days, everything was fine. We didn't talk much, just passed each other in the kitchen, exchanged small talk. She worked nights, she said, so she was gone a lot. That worked for me. I liked having the place to myself, but then things started to go missing. Nothing major at first, just little things. A phone charger, a half-full bottle of shampoo, leftovers I know I hadn't eaten. I figured I was just forgetful. Then, I started waking up at night. Not fully, just enough to hear things. The sound of footsteps in the hallway. My bedroom door creaking slightly, as if someone had pushed it open a crack. Once, I woke up to the sound of whispering. Just outside my door. I told myself it was the pipes. Or her watching videos too loud. Or maybe I'd imagined it. Then I started noticing her behavior. She stopped making eye contact. Would just stand in the kitchen staring at the wall, unmoving, like she'd forgotten what she was doing. Sometimes she'd be gone for days, then suddenly show up in the living room without a sound. Once, I walked past her room and saw her sitting on the edge of her bed, totally still, hands folded in her lap, eyes wide open. She didn't blink, didn't even look at me. I started keeping my door locked at night. Then, one morning, I decided I'd had enough. I started packing, quietly. No drama, no confrontation. I didn't care about the security deposit. I just wanted out. That's when I noticed something strange about the front door. The lock turned, but the door wouldn't open. I thought maybe it was jammed, so I pulled harder. Nothing. Then I looked closer. Nails. Dozens of them. The frame had been nailed shut from the outside. I backed away, slowly, heart thudding in my chest. I tried the window next. Same thing. Sealed, shut, bolted, screws drilled into the tracks. That's when I heard it. Her footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate. I grabbed my phone and locked myself in the bathroom. No signal. Of course. I sat on the floor, hands shaking, trying to think, trying to breathe. Outside the door, I heard her moving. No knocking, no talking, just pacing. Then I heard her stop. The sound of something being dragged across the floor. Heavy. Scraping. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in the bathroom until daylight. When I finally cracked the door open, the apartment was silent. Empty. She was gone. I used a screwdriver from the kitchen drawer to pry open one of the smaller windows and crawled out barefoot into the alley. I didn't go back for my things. I reported everything, told the police, the landlord, even the Facebook group. But the listing was gone. Her profile was deleted. No record of a lease, no real ID tied to the name she gave me. It was like she'd never been there at all. But I was. And I still check the inside of every lock before I go to sleep. Because sometimes you don't move in with a roommate. Sometimes you move into someone else's trap. That's all for today, folks. If you like to see more of this creepy content, click on the video on screen.